NFL Week 6 Survivor Pools. If you're here, you're still alive. Coming up next, we will scratch and survive. All right, guys, it is Week 6 in the NFL. Scratching and surviving. Most of you advanced from last week as we had no real huge upsets. We might have lost about 10% of people in most pools, but I think a lot of you were probably on the Detroit side, if not that, Miami. We talked last week about Detroit being probably the better option only because we've got Miami coming up this week as one of the big favorites. So we'll dive into that. We'll dive into the Survivor Grid. Of course, I've got my spreadsheet that I'm going to go over with you guys and see just what the changes are when we change the future value and when we look at no future value, who the favorites are, who you should be taking, all that good stuff. This is a unique type of show. Those of you who are with us each and every week, you understand that. I don't just go over who the best options are. Most YouTube videos, most ESPN, any of these sites that do Survivor, they don't put a lot of thought into it. We do a lot of research, a lot of thought, and a lot goes into our shows, not just for Scratching and Surviving, but all the other shows that we have here on the Sharp app. And of course, the Sharp app is sponsoring this. You can see the QR code right over there. Just go ahead and QR code it, do what you have to do with your camera, and you'll be able to download the Sharp app. Yesterday, top props, 3-0 for me on the props, all big plus money props. I had 3 RBI props in the Houston game. All 3 hit. They were, a couple of them were plus 170, and then we had one at like plus 260. So big winners on those. And the top props, I do an article every day for the top props in MLB. NBA's coming up. We're going to have the NBA. I do NFL. And those are all based on our Proptimizer tool that you'll see inside of the Sharp app. And I find the best props that I like on our top props Proptimizer tool. And the tool really gives you the best, what the tool thinks are the best options for the day on props. And then I go through there, I filter it myself, and I give you guys what I think the best of the best props are. So it's a tool that if you are a prop bettor, it's invaluable. And if you play on Prize Picks, we've got a version of that tool that crushes Prize Picks. So definitely check that out. For Survivor Pool, though, this week, let's jump right into Survivor Grid. Let's talk about what we've got going on. So I'll bring that up for you guys now. As you can see, we've got a couple of really big favorites, really 3 big favorites on the board for this week. You've got Buffalo minus 15 against the Giants. You've got Carolina or Miami, a 2-touchdown favorite against Carolina, and then Kansas City is a double-digit favorite against Denver. So you've got 3 really chalky teams here this week. If you are in a large pool, this is obviously the place you're going to be looking. You may have taken Buffalo already. If you passed on Miami last week, this certainly could be an option to take Carolina or take them against Carolina this week. And Kansas City is another team that you may have taken along the way. If not, you're going to be contemplating a Denver pick. But I like to stay with the largest favorites when you're in a small pool. Those of you who have been with me on this show for any number of weeks know I always stress in smaller pools, you want to take the most optimal route. So if you have Miami available to you, what would be the most optimal route? Well, Miami this week, and then let's look at I like to look maybe just 3 weeks in advance. It's hard to look too far, much more than that out, especially in a small pool. Larger pools will look a little further than that, but in a small pool, I just want to know what the next 3 weeks holds for me. So you see, if we took Miami, and let's say we've already taken Buffalo, that would leave us with San Francisco or Seattle. Presumably, maybe we took Kansas City already. There's a chance you took San Francisco. Unlikely you've taken Seattle. So Seattle would probably be the choice, or the San Francisco pick the following week. And then in week 8, you see Miami would be a choice, but we've taken them. Buffalo, we're going to presume that you've taken Buffalo as well. And then the Chargers look like a really good option. So you do have a way to go, a pretty reasonable line, and one that's not going to be far off from the market. It's definitely the optimal choice if you have Miami at your disposal, going Miami, either San Francisco or Seattle, and then the Chargers come week 8. So that's kind of how it looks for the next 3 weeks. If you are in a larger pool, now before I get to that, let me just talk quickly about hedging. I know people bring up hedging to me all the time. We're probably still early in most pools for hedging. Now, if you were in an extremely small pool, perhaps you want to think about it. Um, the smaller the pool, the less I really feel the urge to want to hedge. I'm going to just try and win that pool. I think the hedging comes into play when you get down to, let's say, at least 10x, probably more than like 20x equity. And you know how we figure out the equity. You're just going to take how many entries you have, divide that by the number of entries that are left in the pool. That gives you the probability of you winning that pool, if all things being equal. And you could compare that to where you were at the start of the pool. So if you started with 1,000 people in the pool at $10 a person, there's 10,000 in the pot, or $10 per entry. There's 10,000 in the pot. If you had one entry, you've got you have a 1 in 1,000 chance of winning that pool. If the pool drops down to 100 people, we've now lost 900 people in that pool. There's 100 people in there. You've got $100 worth of equity now in that pool, right? You have a 1 in 100 chance of winning, but you've got $100 in equity. You've got 10 times the equity that you started with at the beginning of the pool. So typically, if I could get to maybe 20 times equity, I'm going to start contemplating hedging. And by hedging, what we want to do, I like to do, is not necessarily bet against my team on the money line. I like to bet against my team on the spread, because then that gives me an opportunity to hit on both sides. So if we were hedging this week with Kansas City, and we took Kansas City in our survivor pool, and we hedged and we bet against Kansas City here. So Kansas City being a 14-point favorite, if we took Carolina on the spread Denver on the spread at 10.5, and Kansas City were to win this game by 7, we'd advance with our Kansas City pick and then be able to pocket some money with Denver. Now, the reason you want to start doing this as late as possible, this is with all hedging opportunities. What happens is, if you hedge too soon, you could actually put yourself in a situation where you lose money. Let's say we bet against Kansas City this week and they crush. Then we take whoever we're taking the following weekend, they crush. That happens 3-4 weeks in a row where they cover the spread. We've now put ourselves in a negative situation. Yes, we're advancing in the pool, but we're going to have to hedge more and more and more each time just to get back our hedge money. So hopefully that makes sense. As we get deeper into this, I'm going to go over some really specific ways that we can hedge, because as we get to like week 13, 14, that's where we're going to see people perhaps with 3, 4, 5, 10 people left in their pool that started out with a few hundred. So that's when you're going to really get the best hedging opportunities, and we'll go over that some more. So again, back to Survivor Grid. As you can see, this is what we're looking at for this week. Now, if we jump into the Survivor spreadsheet that I run, or that I've developed, we could see this is at 0% weight, right? We've got the Miami-Carolina game, Buffalo, and the Giants. Those are going to be the two most popular picks at 0% weight. The 0% future value weight just means we're not looking at future value. This future value number, the higher the number, the less future value a team has. This is just based on Survivor Grid's projections of where the spreads are going to be in the future. Now, just because a team has very little future value doesn't mean they may not have another good opportunity coming up in the near future. This is just a guide. This is going to just kind of point you in a direction, not always the right direction. So when we jump this up to 25%, you see it doesn't really change all that much, the spreadsheet. Now, we could jump it up to 50%, and you'll see some changes here as we get to 50. Now, Las Vegas becomes an option at 50%. Let's just take a look if we like them. Like, all of a sudden, Miami, not as good a play, because when we go back to the Survivor Grid, we could see Miami, just how many opportunities you're going to have with Miami. Look at this line. You've got New England in week 8. You've got Vegas in week 11, at the Jets in week 12, at Washington. I mean, you've got a ton of opportunities to take Miami. So if we're in a larger pool not taking Miami, which you see 26.6% of pools are taking Miami this week. And the reason is people are moving to some of these other picks just because of the future value of Miami. There's a lot of future value with Buffalo as well. You've got at New England next week, Tampa in week 8, at Denver, home for Denver in week 10, home for the Jets in week 11. So a lot of opportunities. If you've not taken Buffalo and you're not taking Miami, there's a lot of opportunity there to take them in future weeks. Kansas City is going to have some future value. Big favorite this week, but at home to the Chargers next week. Maybe not a spot that you necessarily want to take them, but we don't have great options next week, as we showed you before. You've got San Francisco and Seattle. Kansas City will probably be lesser owned next week because of the fact that a lot of people can take Seattle. San Francisco still relatively untaken, so a lot of people, these will probably be the two most taken teams next week. So you could get some leverage by taking Kansas City next week in not as great a spot as they'll have throughout the season, but we'll talk about next week when we get there. But that's a possibility of some leverage next week with Kansas City. At Denver's a good spot for them. At Las Vegas, at Green Bay, at New England, Las Vegas at home. So you're going to have options, obviously, with Kansas City, one of the better teams in the league. So when we go back to the Survivor spreadsheet, Vegas pops up. So we talked about Vegas a little bit. Let's just look at the Survivor grid. Let's go over the Vegas schedule. Now, do we like this pick? They're only a 3-point favorite this week, right? So we don't love that when you've got all these big favorites. If you're in a small pool, you're not even contemplating this. Do we like this play in a larger pool? Obviously, you're seeing 1.4% at only a field goal favorite. So some people are going that route because of the lack of future value on Vegas. So when we look at it, are there opportunities? Now, the Giants at home in week 9. So this is interesting. You'll have Vegas as an option. Cleveland against Arizona is certainly going to be an option. Baltimore, if you have yet to take them, it's maybe not unlikely, but a lot of people have taken Baltimore. Week 1, they were a popular pick. So there's a chance that you can't take Baltimore. But New Orleans, I think just about everyone's going to have at their disposal. And against Chicago would be a very popular pick. Now, when you look at it, when we're looking at leverage, taking Vegas in week 9 is going to probably give you much better leverage than taking them this week. Although they're going to be fairly owned as well. But you're going to get New Orleans is going to be highly owned. Vegas will be less owned, I'm anticipating, than New Orleans will, and probably Cleveland as well. So I think you're going to have a better leverage spot in week 9. So I don't love Vegas here in week 6. What are some of the other teams that we're looking at? Jacksonville's a team that people are taking. When we look on the spreadsheet, they do pop up as one of the options. Jacksonville, and you see right now 2% of pools. Look at the line for Jacksonville. They're a 4-point favorite this week. You've got Minshew in there who has performed fairly well. It doesn't look like much of a drop-off, if any drop-off from Richardson. But what else can we take Jacksonville? I mean, they're projecting a 3.5-point favorite against Tennessee in week 11. Not necessarily a week that we are going to be targeting them. Not until week 17 in Carolina, and that's a long ways away, even if you're in a larger pool. So there is a possibility. Let's just look at that week 17. What else is going on? Yeah, Jacksonville, Cleveland, if you passed on them in week 9 and week 11, week 15, unlikely, but you're going to get the Jets. What's going to wind up happening, when you get to these week 17s, it's going to be really difficult to take a team as large a favorite as Jacksonville will potentially be in week 17. So there is some there's two schools of thought here. If you get there, and again, week 17 is a long ways away. If you get there, almost everyone's going to have Jacksonville at their disposal who's left. So if you're in a super large pool, it's probably a good idea not to have Jacksonville. That's your opportunity there. If Jacksonville were to lose to Carolina, to have another option and be able to pick up a lot of equity in the last couple of weeks of the season. So again, I'm speaking to those of you in really large pools. Those of you in the small pools, you're sticking up to the top here. Larger pools, you may be looking at other options. Jacksonville, the Rams are going to be another one, and that is why they're being taken at 13% right now against Arizona. Let's look at the Rams' rest of their schedule. Home for Pittsburgh, you don't love it. At Dallas, not happening. At Green Bay, you don't love that game. The bye. Home for Seattle, not a great game. At Arizona is not a great game. Potentially, though, we could see the Rams, maybe the Rams are better than we think, and then the Arizona game, Arizona's played really well. But again, there's always a possibility that these lines are going to change. But as it stands right now, their next best option is going to be week 15 against Washington. Let's just look at what that week looks like. You know, Cleveland's popping up a lot here in the future. So just keep that in mind. There's a lot of weeks here with Cleveland that are potential play. The Rams, New Orleans against the Giants, Cincinnati, Minnesota, Detroit, Denver. So there's a chance here. We've probably taken Detroit to get to this week. There's a chance you're going to have some options come week 15. So this becomes an interesting play, and that's why 13% of people are on them. The Rams in larger pools could potentially be a play. Again, this is for those of you in larger pools. I don't necessarily mind it, although you're probably going to get them in a better leverage spot. If we look at the let's look at the survivor sheet, because I like my numbers a little bit better as far as win probability. There's about a 36% chance that you are going to lose one of these top teams. Miami, Buffalo, or Kansas City is a 36% chance that one of these teams loses. If you avoid those teams altogether and you take a team like the Rams, you have about a 24-25% chance that you win your game and one of these lose. If that's the case, you're going to lose about 25% of picks in your pool, not to mention any other games that may lose if Jacksonville were to lose or one of these other teams. So we'll probably lose somewhere between 25 and 30% of entries if you were to win with the Rams. So you have to weigh if that is worth the risk in taking a team that is not necessarily the best team on the board this week. In larger pools, you may opt to do that. So those are some of your options for this week. As always, guys, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and comment down below. I love answering your questions on Survivor Pools. Check out the QR code right over there, and check out the Sharp app. We do appreciate that. Love hearing from you guys. Best of luck. I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of survivors next week, but who knows? If chaos ensues, it might just be me, you, and 3 or 4 other people. So give us that like while you can. I appreciate it. Good luck, guys. We will see you next week.